Chapter 9: Cultural Foundations for Economic Power, Black Artists and Athletes. Cultural Foundations for Economic Power, Artists and Athletes. If I didn't have hard luck and trouble, I wouldn't have any luck at all. Old blues song. Old blues song. Obviously, a major premise of this book is that Black America's future is inseparably connected to its past. The majority of this book illuminates the facts and characteristics of the systemic and racist exploitation of blacks. This chapter takes a reader back into history one more time, but for a different purpose, to suggest ways by which blacks can use their history and culture to create wealth and power through vertical business development. Vertical businesses can be built within any industry where one group has major control, if not a monopoly, on certain resources. Music, music entertainment, and sports represent probably the best, if not the only two, excellent areas where black Americans have great potential advantage to develop vertically linked and controlled businesses. Black Americans have a long and intimate involvement with American music and sports, yet they have not reaped a full share of the financial rewards created via their talents. Music and sports are multi-billion-dollar industries and hold the potential to produce tremendous wealth, not just for black entertainers and athletes, but for a significant number of other blacks as well. Blacks can apply vertical business integration in these industries by harnessing their physical gifts, some of which are were manipulated and exploited by whites through slave breeding, and their musical genius, which was also manipulated by whites, and now use them to build economic self-sufficiency and power. In the concept of vertical integration, a single entity or group controls all aspects of the creation and sale of a service or product, including obtaining the raw materials, processing and manufacturing, then distributing, marketing, and selling the finished products. Through vertical integration, the group that controls raw resources and markets can reap the benefits without sharing its proceeds with middlemen and others outside of the group. The group has the chance to take its profits or reinvest them in the business. Either way, it becomes stronger. The black community could adapt these concepts to the music and sports industries and thereby spread millions of dollars into black businesses throughout the nation. In such a vertically integrated economic chain, money for goods and services would flow up and down the black chain. Each link would benefit from, but also contribute to rebuilding the black economic infrastructure by providing employment, new business, and an improved tax base, and a more economic independent community. The process would build a stronger community because all fortunes would be connected and grow together. The concept would provide both entrepreneurial and investment opportunities for blacks and could be applied to many other industries. In sports, for example, black athletes could band together and demand that black businesses receive manufacturing contracts for sports equipment, concession businesses at stadiums, and arenas, and a large share of the legal work, travel, and transportation contracts, janitorial contracts, and whatever else is needed to support the industries that center around their talents. Similarly, black musical artists could create or use black owned recording studios, printing and pressing facilities, and other businesses necessary for the recording process. Music and sports are expressions of black culture, and black athletes and artists have inherent power to control access to these to the most to the most valuable raw resources in these industries, uh, their unique skills. If a system of integrated businesses could be built around their services, then black athletes and artists could use monopoly control of their skills as leverage to create further business opportunities for others. The historic exploitation of black music and other art forms provides a strong philosophical reason to target these industries as visible examples of a new black economic agenda. Agenda. Economic or immigrant groups have always built vertically integrated businesses within their communities and around their cultures. They have commercialized and controlled their culture, retained the resulting capital within their communities, and created employment opportunities for their people. Nothing prevents black people from doing the same. Building wealth through black music. Much of American popular music, from rock and roll to jazz, swing, and gospel, is rooted in black music. Most other African art forms were destroyed by slavery or diluted to such an extent that the original distinctive characteristics were lost. But the musical aspect of black culture survived slavery and has prospered. Though many black individuals have become successful as artists, they have failed to fully access or control the money generated by the music industry. They have not had a strong presence in the production, distribution, marketing, or sale of music or the related legal or business work. Black music is the basis for one of the world's wealthiest industries. It has a unique role in popular world culture. The wealth and power of the music industry offer the most compelling reasons for blacks to recapture control of this cultural resource. The roots of black music and dance. White society's interest in black culture and musical art forms is deeply rooted in history. Whites were fascinated by African customs, especially native dance and song. The black Africans' physical movements were rhythmic, uninhibited, and sensuous. Whites found their dancing, singing, chanting, cries, and other sound effects compelling, erotic, and emotionally stimulating. Whites liked to observe Whites liked to observe blacks performing, not only because black art forms conveyed a sense of contentedness, but because whites were entranced by the black style. They liked what they saw, they liked what they felt, and they found ways to manipulate it, control it, imitate it, and make money from it. The conversion of African music to New World or Black American music began aboard the slave ships as the music was transformed in response horrible to the horrible conditions of enslavement. The slaves expressed their physical and psychological pain through song, music, and dance. Captains of the slave ships gave slaves opportunities to sing, dance, and express their sorrows. These releases of emotion were like a drug that raised the slave's spirit and burned off surplus in energy, quelling pent-up hostilities that represented a constant danger to their white captors. During the long voyages from Africa to the New World, both the slaves and the crews looked forward to these release rituals, which became known as dancing the slaves. For added enjoyment, some slave ships provided musical instruments such as tambourines, harps, fiddles, and banjos for the slaves. Ships without musical instruments often permitted slaves to make music by using pots and pans. The most commonly used accompanied sounds were vocal harmony, hand clapping, or foot stomping. The long voyages and brutal conditions generated deep new emotions in the slaves, who modified their traditional African songs, music, and dances to convey how they felt about their forced voyage from Africa. The white slave traders were fascinated by the emerging new sounds and dances. In the New World slave markets, the slaves retained and continued to modify their music and dance heritage. European settlers began to openly express their interest in slave music. Some plantation owners gave slaves musical instruments. The gifts were investments that provided entertainment as well as profits. Advertisements for slaves sometimes touted musical and dancing talents because such skills increased slaves' value. By the Revolutionary War, the Act of 1776 called blacks into military service to be employed as drummers and fifers. In rural plantation areas, slave musical performances were the primary entertainment, and dancing was the favorite form of recreation. Throughout the South, slaves played fiddles, banjos, and drums to their masters' special plantation balls. Whites developed an appetite for the distinctive way that blacks played the jig and other Negro tunes. During holiday seasons and weekends, whites customarily gathered their slaves into the yards to sing, dance, and make music to entertain the master's family members and guests. The singing and dancing of slaves added to the security and comfort of the slaveholders. They disliked and did not trust silent blacks. Yeah. They wanted slaves to sing while they worked and to at least give the impression that they were happy. Black work songs developed into some of America's first folk music and became blacks' statements to the world. These work songs described the hard, unhappy lives of slaves. With primitive tools, little food, and monetary compensation, they sweated their lives away in the cotton fields, mines, or on the rail lines, producing wealth for the white class. The burdens and pains of slavery and Jim Crowism were eased by the music and occasional chance to dance. It gave blacks the strength to endure. The Emancipation Proclamation brought short lived joy and celebration into the lives of the slaves who sang and danced for days, ecstatic about their new legal freedom. But the failure of Reconstruction made life harder for the newly freed slaves. Confused and abandoned by the North, the ex slaves continued to make emotional statements in the only ways open to them, new musical forms. They sought emotional comfort and release in the churches. The ex slaves' inability to read the hymn books or musical notes gave them the freedom to play and sing what they felt in their souls. Outside of the churches, blacks the spirit blended the spirituals with old slave work songs and called it blues, called it the blues. Whether it was the church or the street corner, blacks accentuated their music with emotion. The black blues singer was a storyteller who powerfully conveyed the deep sorrows and pains of a black nation imprisoned within a white nation. Often, white society responded to the new black music in a manner that reflected their emotional dilemma. They were attracted to it and simultaneously repulsed. The more religiously conservative whites affixed the more religiously conservative whites affixed derogatory labels to black music. They called blues race music. By the 19th century, New Orleans had become the center of a new black or a new form of black music called jazz, which was a shortened label for what whites called jackass music. Hmm. In their happier in their happier moods, blacks created Dixieland and ragtime music. Ragtime was labeled coon music by whites. Gospel music is a product of the 20th century as similar to black secular music. especially blues and jazz. The gutsy cries and grunts, the gutsy cries and grunts in rhythm and blues music took on the label of soul music. Blacks expressed their music down from generation to generation. It expressed their hopes, determinations, and assurance that there would be a better life. Popular country popular country and western music has heavy black roots, coming from the musical background established by black slave entertainers and vagabonds. Segregation in rural areas of the country maintained an archaic form of European speech patterns and culture that resulted in bluegrass and western music, which were more closely identified with rural whites. However, popular and progressive country music has been incrementally updated with black sounds through the years. The exploitation and minstrelization of black music. From the beginning, black music and dance continue to thrive in an atmosphere of detraction, oppression, uh, distortion, and theft. White minstrels in the 1800s gave rise to some of the first imitative exploitation of black music and dance. With blackface makeup, whites mimicked blacks and provided whites with black entertainment without blacks. These white performers provided whites with a safe window to a cultural and emotional world of to the cultural and emotional world of black people and made money. They capitalized on white fascination and attraction to black art forms. The exploitation of black art forms has changed very little from the earliest instance of Jim Crowism. On a Cincinnati street in 1830, Dan Rice, a famous white black-faced minstrel performer, saw a ragged little black boy singing "Jump Jim Crow, Jump," and copied the dance in his performances to the great pleasure of whites. Rice and other vaudeville, vaudeville, vaudeville black, vaudeville black minstrels, okay, grew popular and wealthy, imitating black songs, dances, and comedy acts that contributed to creating negative stereotypes of blacks. By the Civil War, minstrel shows had become the most popular form of entertainment in the North, in part because they ridiculed blacks and justified Northerners' indifference to black enslavement. A few blacks who had learned to mock themselves broke the minstrel tradition by the 1890s. Some black entertainers even whitened their faces, turning the paradox of skin color full circle. Okay, full circle. Turn blah 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 full circle. Okay. hmm By the turn of the century, the white vaudeville started to tone down its harsh mocking of blacks. This slight change was occurring primarily because talented black pioneers like Bob Cole wrote music and sketches for white vaudeville shows. This allowed white entertainers to use black songs, dances, jokes, and slang expressions without being too offensive. Black facing would not die. White minstrels remained popular in certain sections of the country well into the third decade of this century. Paradoxically, paradoxically, the early 20th century, in the early 20th century, blacks could not perform their own music and dance before white audiences due to segregation laws. Many black entertainers traveled to Europe and entertained the more liberal and enthusiastic audiences there. White performers capitalized on the fact that blacks did not have a vertical commercial control of their music. Mhm. When black entertainers left the country, they left a void that was filled by a new form of white minstrelization. White performers began to try to sound black. The Roaring Twenties, blacks had lost blacks had lost ragtime, Dixieland, and jazz to big band white musicians such as Jack Teagarden, Benny Goodman, and the Dorsey Brothers, who expropriated the art form under the label of swing. Music and dance went together. Black dances such as the Charleston tap, jitterbug, and cakewalk were copied in white dance halls. By the 1930s and 40s, a blackface singer named Al Jolson received national recognition by mimicking blacks. Kneeling on one knee and singing Mammy or Swanee River, Jolson's performances depicted the bewildered black yearning for the plantations of the past. Mhm. Mhm. The integration movement that began in the mid 1950s opened the door for whites to totally appropriate black music. Under that time, black music was primarily available only in black clubs and underground. Blacks did not own radio stations, and only one or two white stations would play real black music. It was not sold in white record stores. Only black mom and pop shops sold it. White singers scoured black sources for new music and again minstrelized it for white audiences. This time without using blackface makeup. They made fortunes in white markets by imitating popular songs of rhythm and blues artists. Elvis Presley became known as the king of rock and roll. Much of the music sung by Elvis and Bill Haley and the Comets was music that was written and previously sung by black rhythm and blues artists. The title rock and roll came from an old blues song of the Big Joe Turner called Shake, Rattle, and Roll, which Haley and the Comets popularized among white audiences. Hardly any black musical artists received respect, credit, or copyright compensation for their music. from jazz, blues, Dixieland, gospel, ragtime, swing, bebop, boogie woogie, or rhythm and blues, stripped. Okay, other music from rhythm and blues. Okay, stripped of their music and revenue in the United States, black musicians increased their efforts to establish new markets in Europe in the late 1950s, just as their black predecessors had done in the 1920s. By the early 1960s, Europeans had been exposed to black music and dance and could imitate blacks. In the mid 1960s, the mid 1960s witnessed an influx of black influenced musicians and singers such as the Beatles, Rolling Stones, the Bee Gees, and Elton John. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio, actually honors many of the whites as musicians and performers, as artists who discovered black music rather than as imitators who renamed it. Michael Bolton is the current popular white singer of black music. In responding in responding to a letter from a reader, Parade magazine, in responding to a letter from a reader, Parade magazine, January 2nd, 1994, expressed its belief in the mainstream popularity of Bolton, saying he is a white whaler who merely redoes old black soul ballads. When a nationally known black television when a nationally known black television station informed Bolton that blacks felt he was mimicking black singers and exploiting black music, he assured the newscaster that he loved black music and was paying it the highest respect by singing it. Naturally, some black artists such as Fats Domino, Ruth Brown, and Little Richard, regular targets of white musical imitators, did not see such actions as respect and sued white artists who became rich and famous by copying their music. A few have been successful in their lawsuits. Blacks' lack of capital, production technology, marketing networks, and access to copyright and artistic protection not only left them exposed to exploitation of imitators, but also left them absolutely no control over their cultural product. When major white record companies refused to contract with black performers, a few smaller white companies filled the void and developed R&B record labels and promoted black music to black markets. The return on their investment was high, not only because they created monopolies on black talent, but because they paid black performers a pittance for their valuable product.